Please don't share the link or anything. It's just for the people who are part of this course. You would be able to download them onto your computer. I suggest you do that rather than, because that I'm going to close quite soon afterwards, because they aren't fully legal copies, shall we say, but it will allow, I think, everyone to be able to get copies of literally everything we've discussed. I'm in the process of doing that, as well as the PowerPoints, etc., etc. Okay, so there'll be a couple of questions about how long people have access to the YouTube channels. I think I'm not going to close those down. There's no reason to. So as long as I've got a Google account, you can carry on looking at those. And yeah, so I don't know how many people have watched the things we're going to discuss today in advance, because both of them were available. But I think it makes quite a nice change from the kind of quite dark and maybe sort of negative, not negative, but rather serious things we've been looking at so far. So these are two comedies, or at least kind of humorous takes on the art world. So today we're looking at two movies, just two movies: The Horse's Mouth and Art School Confidential. And I called this what did I call this lecture? Let me just see. I called it the gritty edge, the gritty edges. And I thought, yeah, because there are these kind of like aspects of the art world which are often neglected or hidden, which is like really the struggle that people go through to create art. I want to mention that I did put on the shared supplementary channel. If you go right to the bottom of it, you will see that I put a video called The Art World Bubble, The Great Art World Bubble, which again came out of discussion from yesterday, which is about this idea that perhaps there is a artificiality in the art world, which is kind of what we were talking about yesterday, particularly in relation to the square, a kind of inventedness, or people made into something which they aren't, if you like. And what I thought was quite interesting about today's two movies is it's really about artists who are driven to make art. I myself have become very interested in sort of obsessive artists, outsider artists, people who are in really difficult situations. They're in jail, or they are, I don't know, in concentration camps, or they're in, wherever, and they have to make art. And I think this is in some ways a reaction to what I've detected among some people, some younger people, if I may put it that way, today, where they're so disillusioned by their own lives that they just can't pick up a pencil to draw. And I do find it fascinating, people who are driven to make art, and those are kind of what we're going to look at today as well. Okay, so without further ado, what I'm going to do is actually just read you the summary of the movies which I found on Wikipedia. I always say Wikipedia, I think, is wonderful because it's because of its democratic way of being produced. You get these days, after 1 billion edits, you do get a very unbiased view of what things are. So the plot of the movie is eccentric painter Gully Jimson is released from a one-month jail sentence for telephone harassment of his sponsor, Mr. Hickson, Nosy Barbin, who wants to be Jimson's protege. Nosy Barbin, who wants to be Jimson's protege, greets him at Wormwood Scrubs, but Jimson tries to discourage Nosy from pursuing painting for a living. Jimson goes to his houseboat, which his older lady friend Coker has been maintaining in his absence. He tries to borrow money from Hickson and Coker. Jimson and Coker later visit Hickson to secure payment for Jimson's artwork. Jimson tries to steal work back from Jimson's place, but Coker stops him. So in other words, it's this complete sort of comedy of errors that happens. Anyway, Jimson responds to a note from A.W. Alabaster, secretary to Sir William and Lady Beda, who are interested in acquiring Jimson's early works. Jimson and Coker try to secure one of those works from Sarah Munday, Jimson's ex-wife, but she turns him down. And this is what I found quite interesting, is how his early works are sought after, but not the things that he's producing at the moment, which is something we can maybe discuss. When Jimson visits the Bedas, he sees a blank wall in their residence and is inspired to paint the raising of Lazarus. He learns that the Bedas are leaving for 6 weeks and takes advantage of their absence to execute the painting. An old artistic rival, Abel, intrudes on Jimson to bring a large block of marble to fulfill a sculpture commission for British Rail. Jimson pawns all the Bedas' valuables, and Abel and Jimson accidentally destroy part of the Bedas' floor when the marble is dropped. After Jimson has completed the painting, the beaders return shocked by the painting. They fall through the hole in the floor. Jimson returns to his houseboat and finds Coca there. She's fired from her barmaid job after the press reported the incident of Hickson's residence. Later that evening, she surprises Jimson with the news that Hickson is dead, and he has bequeathed his collections of Jimson's works to the nation. These works are displayed in the Tate Gallery, which Jimson visits. In the long line to the exhibit, Jimson sees Sarah. He again attempts to regain the piece in her possession, but she gives him a rolled tube. When he returns to the houseboat, Cokie and Nosy find that the roll contains only toilet paper. Nosy follows Jimson to Sarah's house, where Sarah is knocked unconscious, where Jimson grabs the painting. Jimson and Nosy seek shelter in an abandoned church. We're going to look at this scene. Jimson is immediately inspired to execute his largest work, The Last Judgment on a Blank Wall. Learning that the church is about to be torn down within a fortnight, Jimson, Nosy, and Cokie recruit youngsters to help complete the painting. A local council official overseeing the building's demolition objects to their activities. Jimson recruits Lady Beader to participate. The painting is completed on the scheduled day of demolition. After the demolition crew warns everyone to stand back, Jimson suddenly drives the bulldozer through the wall, feeling it necessary to destroy the work before anyone else did. Jimson runs back to his boat and sets sails down the Thames before Nosy and Coke can stop him. That's the summary. And it's, as I say, it's a kind of bittersweet comedy. It's based on a book by Joyce Carey, and this movie has actually been described as the one of the best movies about an artist ever made. And the book itself is quite wonderful. Excuse me. I remember when I started working at Michaelis about 25 years ago, one of the lecturers said to me, had I read The Horse's Mouth? And I said I hadn't. And he said, well, best you do. No one should really lecture on art without having read it. And it is an absolutely wonderful read, if you can get hold of it. But let's watch a scene from the movie, and then we'll take it from there. So now let me do this properly. Right, remember to put on sweat, and let's get there. That's not what I want to do. Just give me a second, sorry. Hopefully this is in the right place. Cool. So this is towards the end of the movie.
A wall. The Last Judgment. What do you think I am? A surgeon? Here you are, Michelangelo. Square B1 in the top left-hand corner. Oh, for the wings of a dove.
Hold still.
Collect your paints from Nosy. It won't stay white for
Sorry,
long.
the audio is a little
I'm a colourful man.
I'm sick of cleaning you up, and if you're going to mess about with paint, you're wearing this.
I'm not painting, Cokie. I'm supervising my apprentices. What's your name, dear? Oh, speak up. You'll never make good if you mumble.
Sybil!
That's better. Let the world know who you are, the great Sybil. Well, you take C2, Snout of the Whale. And nothing niggly, mind you. Let me hear the paint going on.
Call yourself an artist? What do you mean, not painting?
There's no time, Cokie. It's a race against the demolition boys. Once my design's on that wall, they won't dare touch it. A British painting of unparalleled magnitude.
Excuse me, Mr. Jimson.
Yes?
C2 appears to be occupied. There's some mistake somewhere.
Hey, you! Fatty! You're rolling around in the wrong square!
Oh, I'm terribly sorry, Mr. Jimson. Well, it's so confusing up here.
It could happen to anyone, dear. All the greatest artists got their squares wrong. Numbers were invented by Arabs who hate art.
You'll have to lower Madge.
Half a pint of Viridian. You two, give him a hand with Madge. Come on, stir it. You ever seen your mum beating up eggs? Or is your house all modern machine?
Hold tight, Madge! All right, Madge. We heard that there were painting lessons from Gally Jimson.
That's right, 6 an hour.
He's paying for the three of us.
Where do we go and what do we do?
Oh, give hand over there with Madge. Oh, dear baby, why is mine? Oh!
Whale upside
I'm
down.
just fast forwarding to.
But, Mr. Jimson, surely a whale doesn't have its eye under its jaw, does it?
None of your sarcasm now. My whales do, otherwise they wouldn't be real. They'd just be pictures out of a whale book.
Shall I try and reverse it?
Not now, it's too well alone.
You mean it's finished?
She's coming down in 15 seconds from now.
It's not my responsibility, I assure you.
Oi, Bert, come on. Get started.
Okay. Cool. Can everyone see me now? Hopefully. Yeah. Sorry about the out of syncness. This sometimes happens with YouTube. There's nothing much I can do about that. But it gives you a sense of towards the end of the movie what happens. And I don't know how many of you have seen it, but it is quite hilarious. It's a comedy of errors, but it's also, as I say, bittersweet because it's about an artist who really is obsessed with making, and various things happen in his life which prevent this from being possible. And the tragedy is he it starts with him actually in jail. He's been put in jail as I mentioned for harassing somebody. He's somebody who finds it very difficult to deal with the formal art world. So what we saw yesterday, what was quite interesting, was this kind of constructed art world of rich people, of wealthy patrons, of galleries that are very well sponsored and well endowed with trusts, etc. And the professionalization. I think one of the people, one of you mentioned that, like, the professionalization of art. And here we have somebody who, a little bit like Vincent van Gogh, was just obsessed with making. He just wanted to make, and he wanted to share. And the kind of the tragedy in this is that no one's interested in the art that he makes at the moment. They were interested in his earlier work, and he ends up having to try and steal back from his ex-wife. He knows that he's got some of his early work hidden under the floorboards in our house, and he's trying to steal back his earlier art to sell. And I mean, I can't imagine how tragic this must be for an artist. It actually is based on certainly a real case that happened, which is Giorgio de Chirico, the artist who at the end of his life, he had produced some. If you know his work, it's those empty scenes of empty cities and things like that. And his style changed completely, and his subject matter changed completely as he progressed as an artist in his life. And he ended up kind of forging his early work in order to keep alive, because people weren't interested in the work he was making at the end of his life. They wanted the young de Chirico. So he ended up sort of backdating some of his art and pretending it was earlier. A similar thing happened with Georges Braque, the colleague of Picasso in Cubism, who again moved forward in his art just like Picasso, but people wanted his early work, the work that he made at that time. And I think that's quite sad as well. And again, it speaks about the kind of conflict between the art world per se and the individual artist. So yeah, so that's wait, let me just admit this person. Oh, that's what The Horse's Mouth is about. And as I say, it's kind of bittersweet comedy. And what happens at the end is he literally he gets on his houseboat and he sails into the future. And you imagine that perhaps he's just going to go somewhere else and make his art. That's all he wants to do. He doesn't want to get involved in the formal politics of the art world. He kind of doesn't care in some way. And the second film we're looking at picks us up in a slightly different way. People at the beginning of their career. So what I'm going to do, it's called it's not High School, Art School Confidential, and it's actually based on a comic book that was produced. And I know that my colleague Svea Josephine, she introduced me to this, and it really is hilarious. And if you've ever worked in an art school, it kind of has some very real resonances. So I want to show two clips from it, but let me see if I can just summarize the contents. Basically, this young man called Jerome, he wants to study art. That's really all he wants to do. And his roommates are an aspiring filmmaker, Vince, and a closeted gay fashion designer, Matthew. He looks for love amongst the co-eds, but he's turned off from them all, falling in love with the art model, Audrey. In his art classes, he forms a friendship with the perennial loser, um, uh, Bard, who guides him through the college scene and introduces him to a failed artist, Jimmy, a belligerent drunk. So there's always this belligerent drunk. I mean, Gully in The Horse's Mouth fulfills that kind of thing. We saw it with Vincent, etc. It's almost like, again, a very, very important trope, the drunken artist. As Jerome learns how the art world really works, he finds that he must adapt his vision to the reality that confronts him. The community has been racked by a serial killer, the Strathmore Strangler, who has confounded the police. As Jerome slightly loses his idealism at art school, he finds himself in competition with a strange newcomer, Jonah, an undercover detective, for both Audrey's affection and for artistic recognition. In a wild attempt to win a prestigious art competition, Jerome asks for and gets Jimmy's paintings, all of which are the Strangler's victims. Jerome leaves a lit cigarette in Jimmy's apartment by accident, setting a fire and burning up the apartment and Jimmy. The police arrest Jerome as the Strangler, who in fact was Jimmy. Audrey realizes that her true love is Jerome and that she was stupid to be in love with Jonah, who is actually married, and Jerome is sent to prison. Jerome's paintings, especially one of Audrey, become highly prized by collectors. Vince scores a huge hit with the documentary of the Strangler called My Roommate, the Murderer, and in prison, Jerome continues to paint and sell his work at high prices, not caring that people think he is the killer, while all the while, Audrey is still in love with him. At the end, Audrey and Jerome share a kiss through reflective glass. So again, it's a similar kind of story that the person just wants to make their art. And he, the bizarre thing is he doesn't mind being in jail and being framed as a killer. I mean, we have sort of echoes here again of Scarlet Street. The artist just wants their work to be recognized. So it really is a romp of a comedy. I'm going to show you two scenes. I'm going to show you, the first scene is just all the art students arriving for the first day at the school, which I think is quite funny because it kind of shows all these various stereotypes of what artists are. You're going to see, well, maybe I'll talk over it as we look at it. So let me just share.
Andrew, it's not always possible to hear you when you talk over the film.
Okay,
it's not
fine.
It's not as if we were in the room with you, so it's a bit different for us.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Vanilla.
You know, someday, if you get famous, this could be worth a lot of money.
You're wasting your time, Jerome. You gotta set your sights on a more realistic girl. Shit, here comes Stu. Hey, pencil prick. Thanks for helping me out with that poster for Erickson's class. You said I was a natural artist. Yeah, natural scam artist. Got that right. I don't know, Jerome. It just seems a little too good to be true. Don't you think?
based on the whole thing with the campus murder, but
Okay. Okay, great. So, I mean, that's the introduction, and I find it quite funny. I mean, for many years, when registering new students in first year, you see these characters or these types. What you saw there, for example, is the extremely the person carrying those big square sculptures, an extremely earnest artist who wants to just make art. You see the kind of barefooted hippie. You see the kind of goth girl with nose rings and tattoos. You see the guy who's pretending to be a rocker, but actually his guitar is filled with junk, whatever it may be, and so on. Chart, do you want to ask a question? I see a hand up. Okay.
I don't see a hand up.
Okay, don't worry. It's fine. I think if anyone has a question, perhaps the easiest at this stage, before we get into question time formally, is just to type it in the meeting chat box. Okay. Anyway, I'm going to continue. So, we see all these different, if you like, types of artists, and what's interesting about Art School Confidential is that it really is about idealism, and then idealism that goes sour again because of what's happening with the situation in the art world, so to speak. I'm gonna just show another clip from the movie, which I thought was a very interesting one. It's the first lecture. I think it's the first lecture with the art historian, the art history teacher, and it kind of opens up some quite serious questions actually about what art is and who is represented within art history. So I'm just going to show that scene. Right, so I'm just going to 17 minutes. I think it's here.
Sorry, there's no sound. We can't hear anything. There's no sound whatsoever.
Okay,
Andrew?
sorry. Yeah, okay, sorry about that. Okay,
Thanks.
sorry. I obviously didn't. Okay, thank you.
What is art? Is this art? Or this? Or this? Is that? Ignore that. That's a mistake. Hamlet, War and Peace, Beethoven's Ninth, Guernica. These are works which hold as much emotional resonance today as they did at the time of their creation. What makes a work of art timeless? What qualities must it possess? Yes.
Yeah, everything on your list was done by a dead white male.
Yeah, I noticed that too. Well, to be clear, they were not yet dead when they created those works.
You're just playing to the hands of the patriarchy.
Let's face it, the history of art is largely about the implementation of masculinity.
Oh, that is such bullshit.
It's all part of some Darwinian imperative. Most artists become artists because, quite simply, they have no other way to attract a mate. I hardly think I'm the first to point out that the vast preponderance of artists are, shall we say, physiologically deficient in some way.
Okay, did everyone hear that? Hopefully, did everyone hear that?
Yes,
Hello?
I heard that.
Okay.
Yeah, I heard that.
Great, great. Okay, fantastic. So I mean, I just thought that was interesting because again, this little moment of seriousness almost within this comedy does ask some of the questions that we've been talking about. I mean, who are artists within within the broader social realm? Why are artists so interesting to people? Why are there so many movies about artists? Why is there such a fascination about their lives? And I made this point earlier when we were looking at the biopics. There's, you know, after watching something about watching a movie that ostensibly is about art or artists, you very rarely see the art itself. You rarely get any insight. But when you leave the cinema or stop watching on YouTube or whatever channel you're watching on, you don't really necessarily know that much more about the art. You know more about their lives. And I think there's this fascination, this kind of almost romanticism, if you like, of how artists live, the kind of lives they live. They are seen as these outsiders who have the ability to kind of cross boundaries or cross social norms with a kind of acceptability. And tomorrow, when we conclude, I'm gonna really ask us to think a little bit about that. That do artists have a role in society as sort of transcendent beings, so to speak? Literally, is there kind of magic within art which allows us to see something remarkable or something special in it? Okay, at this point, I'm gonna leave it over to questions. I've got something else to show later if there aren't too many questions. But let's just see if there are any questions or comments at this stage.
Can I also just ask if anyone, well, I can't ask this question, it's idiotic of me. I can't ask you if you're having sound problems, but I trust that the people who are not complaining in the chat bar are hearing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me ask the question. I mean, do you think one of the things that today's movies are about is about a kind of idealism which gets frustrated by the art world? You know, young students beginning their art career, they're filled with excitement and thank you very much. Excitement and ambition and a dream of making a difference to the world, and slowly their aspirations, their dreams get whittled away by the reality of the art world, which is about money, which is about prestige, and yeah. So does anyone have any comments on that, or any questions around that? Oh, great. Did you think it was sad in the film that the good artist had to change his style and match the junk of the other material? I'm assuming this is about the horse's mouth. Well, indeed. I mean, I think it's tragic that you know, an artist is forced to conform with what a non-art producing society deems as what's collectible. It also has to do a lot with money, I think. You know, what sells. I remember a friend of mine who wasn't an artist made a comment. I was giving a series of lectures similar to summer school, actually, at Ezeco Summer School, and I was yeah, thank you, in both films, exactly. And we were talking about artists and how their work is often plagiarized by advertising agencies, which is a reality, and various other things. And he stood up and he said, you know, all the artists he knows could do something else for more money. They're highly intelligent, highly skilled people. And the fact that they continue to make art is actually quite profound and interesting. And you know, I know that a lot of the students I teach, when they graduate, they often end up working in things like the film industry or the advertising industry or something like that, and basically subsidize their art making by doing something which they're less moved to do, shall we say, and subsidize that in order to make the art. Again, it's about this passion that artists have to create something which is profound and world changing. Thanks, Lindsay, for that comment. Any other comments at this stage? Okay, it doesn't seem so. So I'm gonna move then, if that's all right, to something which was actually occasioned by yesterday's discussion, and that's about the idea of the art world and money. So I'm going to show you the beginning of a great documentary, which I'm very pleased to see is available in full on YouTube, and I've put it on the supplementary list. So give me a moment, and I'm just going to cue that up, and hopefully remember to put the sound on. Yep. Okay. So. Okay. So, yeah.
Remember when the global economy was booming? The price of everything was doubling. Steel, gas, property. Oil was $147 a barrel. There were over 1,000 billionaires on the planet, and going up. World markets were full of bubbles, and one bubble was bigger than all the rest. Contemporary art.
At $77 million. Thank you.
This Chinese painting cost a record £3 million. A shiny hanging heart went for almost 12. An Andy Warhol sold for over £35 million. In those days, Damien Hirst butterfly paintings were priced at up to £4 million each, and collectors bought hundreds of them.
I have to say, I've had the time of my life.
What we're witnessing is a gilded age, much like that at the turn of the last century.
I think that we will see $1 billion artwork in our lifetime.
Even when the world economy began to collapse, the contemporary art market kept on rising. The prices seemed to defy all reason. It was as if it had become a game, but only the billionaires knew how to play. Its rules were a mystery. That's why I spent a year investigating the biggest, longest-lasting, bubbliest bubble of them all. And that's why I recently returned to the same art world to see what had happened since boom turned to bust. My name is Ben Lewis, and this is my electric car. I've always liked contemporary art. At home I hang pictures on my walls and exhibition catalogues fill my shelves, but I'd always dreamt of driving a work of art. So I persuaded one of Germany's leading artists to make that wish come true.
There's one swelling here.
Yeah, there should be another one in the back.
And here he is. Tobias Rehberger is known for combining design and conceptual art. He's shown in biennales and museums all over the world.
We try to make it look like a big mistake.
Do you like to work with mistakes? Do you not?
Yeah, I do.
As many as possible.
Yeah, they're usually the more interesting parts of something.
Before he came to visit, Tobias had emailed me computer drawings of how he wanted the bodywork of the car altered, with asymmetrical bumps. I found a garage with artistically minded mechanics, and they set...
Protect myself because I love the artist.
You sure? The art market was more confusing. Prices of Warhols at auction. Jose Magrabi had agreed to meet me to discuss this.
How does one set a price level for an artist like Warhol?
It's very simple. If you have a painting and you think the price is X 100, and there somebody pay 110, the price become 110.
In this article it says that you decided to leapfrog the price for jackies.
We start to buy jackies at $30,000, $40,000.
Right.
And then we bought Jackie for hundreds, and we bought Jackie for 300, and we bought Jackie for 500, and we bought Jackie for 1 million, and we bought Jackie for 2 million. So again, this is if the market at that moment was 2 million, so we paid 2 million.
People say that also that you protect the prices of Warhols. Does that mean anything?
Look, what you mean protect? I'm telling you from the beginning that this is my favorite artist. This is my artist. This is something that I love. This is my passion. So what you mean protect the prices? I protect no one. I protect myself because I love the artist.
You sure? The art market was more confusing than I thought. Jose Mugrabi seemed to agree he was propping up prices, but he said he was only doing that because he loved art so much.
872.
Trying to investigate the art market was very tiring. That night I dreamt I was Jose Mugrabi. I was in his apartment and I was saying, why shouldn't I pay more for Warhols than the next guy if I want them that much? Then Marilyn spoke to me and she said, sometimes a man can have too much of a good thing. Then I woke up. Tomorrow was another day. I had an appointment with Jose's son, Alberto, and another multi-millionaire collector, the New York property magnate, A.B. Rosen. They were in business together. First, they showed me around their offices.
What do we have here? Couple of portraits. A couple of portraits. Those are the ones we talked about.
Celebrity series, right?
Celebrity series, or what people wanted to be known as celebrities. Some of them didn't make it. Gavin Turk, a little bit the view and the idea of Warholian, you know, big faces, silver, black and white.
I don't want to be presumptuous, but I wouldn't get too many Gavin Turks if I were you.
I like why?
I think it's too close to other artists' work.
That's okay. This is Webster Noble. They actually self-portraits of themselves, basically tattooed on their bodies.
On a very cynical day, I worry that neon is the sort of cheese sandwich of contemporary art.
That's okay with me. Nothing wrong with a good cheese sandwich, especially with grilled. This is Tracy Emin, good piece. People like you need to. There's some more.
You've got a couple of medicine cabinets.
Got a couple of medicine cabinets. Our good friend Damien again. This office has a nice Cohen sculpture here. It is very pretty. Here is a great Richard Prince painting.
Ah, that's one of the new ones.
That's one of the newer
ones. You
ones.
must have got that really recently.
That's a more of a recent situation. I love Richard Prince. Great painter. This is a great painting.
What do you like about this picture?
I just love the lightness of it and the coloration and the forms and the hand and the legs. Come on, look at this. Look how great this is. He loved or he hates.
Alongside supporting prices, there was a second criticism, that of market domination made against art dealers like the Mugrabis. In many commodities markets, there are laws about owning so much of something that you can influence the price. It's known as cornering the market. In the 1990s, a Japanese trader was prosecuted for owning 5% of the world's copper supply. The Mugrabis own around 9% of the world's important Warhols. A.B. Rosen owns another 1%. But there are no rules about cornering the market in the art market.
3,400,000 on the hour. Will you give me 3.5? 3.5?
They make this.
Okay. Again, I hope everyone can see me now. So I thought what's quite interesting in that documentary, which is, as I say, at the bottom of the supplementary list, is how the art world, the art market, which becomes dominant, and the Mugrabis, as the narrator says, owns actually owns, I think, 600 Andy Warhols, and he's clearly manipulating the market to kind of increase the value. The irony is this documentary, which was made in 2017, predicted that this art bubble would burst, and didn't actually. Even through the the financial meltdown and various other things, the contemporary art, in fact, the art market in general, has continued to increase exponentially. And you saw right at the beginning of the little clip I showed, there's somebody who says, in our lifetimes, we'll see $1 billion artwork. Well, I mean, the Leonardo, well, supposed Leonardo, there's a big debate about it. Ecce Homo, I think reached $500 million, if I remember correctly. I mean, there's no doubt that that's going to happen in our lifetimes, hopefully. But what the point is, this is about money. This is about using art as a commodity. And in fact, America kind of clamped down on art being used to almost launder money in the mid 2010s. And what happened was that the London art market, as a result, boomed because they didn't have as strict rules in place. I've also put 2 other documentaries in the supplementary list. One about forgeries and fakes, which is extremely interesting because that also plays into some of the debates about this. There's an estimate that you'll see in that documentary that 25% of the artworks currently in museums are probably fakes or not made by the person who they purported to be made by, which is quite astonishing. And I've also put on another documentary about this. It's, for me, tragic, where there's this and it's not the only one, but there's this kind of vault in Switzerland where everything from, as I say, Leonardo's, Picasso's, whatever, are being kept in kind of cold storage in ideal storage conditions, literally as investments. No one can see them. They're never on display. No one knows who owns them. They are very much like stocks and shares. And this is in stark contrast to what we see in the two movies scheduled for today. The idea that art is actually something which an artist makes it a passion to express something to the world. Why is it? And Fanula, maybe you have something to say about this. Why is it that art is held up in this way? And for example, literature is not. Literature is quite democratic. Nobody, a movie. Well, yeah, I think that's quite interesting. I remember Sean O'Toole, the probably South Africa's top art critic. He started out being a literature critic, a book reviewer, I suppose. And I remember he gave a talk at Michaelis where he said that one of the things that shifted his gaze, shall we say, was that the art world was just so much more flashy. There was more champagne. There were more parties. People, a book signing or a launching is quite a drab affair in comparison to an art launching. I don't think there's any discussion about that. The kind of fake celebrity nature about the contemporary art world, I think, is quite interesting in comparison to the passion that an artist has for making art.
So you're saying there are 2 things going on. The one is the real passion, the real genius, the thing that we're actually drawn to, but the thing we buy into is the glamour and the sell. I was wondering if anybody in the class had seen, perhaps I saw it in London. I don't. It's not like I travel much, but on a rare visit to London, I saw a play called Art, in which 3 friends fall out because one of them buys a huge, completely white canvas as a work of art, and the arguments that ensue. I mean, it leads to this breakup of their friendship. But and it's a comedy. I mean, and you do laugh. But yes, I was wondering. You asked about the connection with writing and art. Whether we attach to artists and to some writers, for example, J.M. Coetzee, but maybe not to Marguerite Poland. We attach to some writers and some artists a magical quality. And I rarely use the word magical because I think it's overused, but I mean magical in the sense of having some ability to change reality and change people. And that is that's what attracts us. It attracts us both in a good way to the genius of the artist, but also in a bad way sometimes, in the sense of overrating somebody and loving their work even when you don't love it really, but everyone's talking about it. or him or her.
I think that's a great point. I mean, the Mughrabis, the people who own 600 Andy Warhols, you saw at the beginning of the clip. I've no doubt that whatever passion they had started out as a genuine passion for Andy Warhols, but you know, now an Andy Warhol has become a cipher, if you like, for something else. You know, I don't. It's any kind of Andy Warhol. A print. I think at the last was it Strauss auction in Cape Town, online, of course. An Andy Warhol in an edition of 1,000 sold for a record price for South Africa. And my brother pointed out that you can actually get it online for less than it sold for. So it's become this kind of, it stands in for something else, and that's quite sad, I think, because I don't know the play you're referring to, but I know this is going to sound incredibly lowbrow, but if you've ever watched the Netflix series Daredevil, the kind of arch villain, a villain called Kingpin, is obsessed with a pure white canvas, and for him it brings back memories. It's a long, complicated story, but it brings back memories of the safest space he was in as a child, when he was forced to stare at a blank wall by cruel parents, whatever it was. And I've no doubt that, you know, one of the reasons why people pay as much as they do for art is because art does have a kind of transformative ability, but it does also kind of fulfill other kinds of functions and social functions. I remember the late Karel Skuman, who was a major Afrikaans novelist, a kind of J.M. Coetzee of Afrikaans literature, I suppose, in some ways, Vanilla. He once said to me that the thing about books is that you have to have a real passion for them. They're not like Picasso's. You can't hang your whatever it is, your Marguerite Poland on the wall. It's in a bookshelf tightly shelved with other things. And that shows a kind of real passion that extends beyond a mere market value. Art is a way of showing off. And I'll give you an example from my personal experience. I was once consulting, I guess, with a very wealthy, very, very high net worth individual in South Africa who wanted me to help him, I suppose one could say, decorate his home with artworks. And he knew absolutely nothing about art. But you know, I was trying to talk to him and his wife about what they were interested in and what they're passionate about. And it basically came down to this. They wanted a Kentridge. They didn't know anything about William Kentridge. They knew nothing about his oeuvre or what he had produced over time. And, you know, I was trying to get, did they want some of his flower works? Did they want some of his works about from his videos or his films for projection? Did they want some of his more recent stuff? Did they want a sculpture? They didn't care. They wanted a Kentridge because all their friends had a Kentridge on their walls. And you see, that's where I think it becomes quite sad. And I ended up kind of walking away from that commission, even though it was quite lucrative, because I was just absolutely disheartened at the way that art is has become monetized. And I mean, I still have an idealism around art, and we'll touch upon this tomorrow. And Vanula, I agree with you. I don't like to use the word magic loosely either, but I am going to talk about magic tomorrow, because literally, as you will see in the picture of Dorian Gray, there is some magic that I mean, in the sense, not conjuring like a magic in the sense of magical juju or whatever it is that takes place. We'll see that tomorrow. I'll address that towards the end of the lecture.
Another thing I find interesting, well, I suppose it obsesses me because I would love to make a living out of poetry, and that's not ever going to happen. But the and it's what's come across in the two different types of films you've shown. The one is a generous portrayal of the artist as a struggling being, driven by genius and living in poverty or difficulty. And then the other side is the cynical art world that posthumously makes money out of that person's life and charisma. And the two just, so to me, there's like a disjunct in your viewing list. I mean, I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with your viewing list. What your viewing list shows is that we are really badly split down the middle about how we view artists. And
yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right, Funula. I mean, that disjunction is deliberate, you know. And in fact, you know, there have been about 5 or 7 or 10, I don't know exactly how many, movies about Van Gogh since Lust for Life. There are many kind of smaller movies, shorter movies, etc. And I've never seen a movie about what happened immediately after his death. what happened in the 10 to 20 years after his death. This literally, I'm not exaggerating, Van Gogh, I think, sold 2 paintings in his lifetime. Everyone knows that kind of story. I think there's a bit of debate about how many exactly were sold, but that's not really the point here. Literally the week after his death, his family starts selling his artwork and within 10 years, it's multi-tripled, it's like quadrupled, because his brother was an art dealer. And there literally was a kind of Van Gogh industry that developed around his art. I mean, there are a couple of documentaries around this, but there's never been a film about it, and it's really as tragic. You know, this person who was so passionate, he ended up killing himself. I mean, this is mind-boggling. You know, we see these movies and we kind of see the romanticism around it, but I mean, we're talking about somebody who was in extreme mental anguish, who ends up killing himself because he just can't fulfill what he wants to do. It's giving me goosebumps actually talking about it. And literally a few days after his death, more artworks are sold than in his entire lifetime. And I mean, we know this very well with artists today. I remember when, I mean, the late Cecil Scottness, when he died, there was this, and similarly with Peter Clark, when they died, immediately their work increased dramatically in value. And there's something quite sordid about that, I think.
It's a commodity thing, because I mean, now suddenly the supply is cut off permanently. So that's it. Whatever we've got, that's all the Peter Clarks we've got.
And I've deliberately shown you movies where the artist is still alive, but the artworks that they created at a particular point. If you think of Scarlet Street, if you think of The Horse's Mouth, if you think of Art School Confidential, all of these have this kind of this moment where it's not the artist's work that's interesting. It's the artist's work as it has been commodified and made into a commodity that becomes interesting. I mean, there's a massive industry around faking Andy Warhol. It's quite easy. I mean, his work was mass-produced in a literally, he described it as a factory. Salvador Dali's work is easy to reproduce, if you like. Jackson Pollock is another artist who's been forged on a dramatic scale, and again, that becomes quite interesting. The commodification of artists. A lot of the artists who were shown in that video, that in the Machrabi's collection. Remember when they're walking through that office? Those artists are known as the YBAs, Young British Artists, and they were these people who were through the efforts of Charles Saatchi, the famous somebody wants to be admitted, the famous advertising executive and tycoon. They were elevated as literally as students. The value of the artwork was elevated to ridiculous levels, and you saw examples of the Tracy Emin, the neon piece, Damien Hirst, whose work literally now, those butterfly works would probably sell for, like, I'm not joking, like 100 million at this stage. And their work was elevated to such a level that it kind of created a crisis of confidence in artists. And I think younger people today, they split down the middle. There are some who literally want to create art for the market. And I spoke about how focus groups are used to create either novels or films or whatever it is. It's literally they're trying to see a reaction from the world, and it's not about the individual genius anymore. It's about what the mass want to produce. Two Russian artists.
Sorry, I was just going to say that a couple of questions come up. We could maybe draw.
Sure.
Emma's mentioning a movie called Loving Vincent. If you Emma, can you tell us what it's about? Unmute yourself. Don't know what's happening with the sound today.
Okay, Emma, I'm afraid I've heard of the movie. I haven't seen it, but oh, she doesn't have a mic. Okay, great. While Emma's expanding on a question, I'll just discuss Lindsay's question. What about the Banksy that destroyed itself immediately after being sold for millions? I'll make a note of this. I'll put a clip of this for those of you who haven't seen it. It's quite astonishing. So Banksy is this artist that until very recently nobody knew his identity. He started out as a graffiti artist, a person who made these stencils on walls, often very critical of government or police, etc., kind of outsider. the kind of artists we've been looking at a lot in the series of lectures. And he was taken up as a celebrity artist. People would then chip away these graffitis, graffitos, I think they call, of the wall, and like kind of take them into galleries. And Banksy then started messing around with the art world, and he produced this one work, which I'm not joking, this is absolutely amazing. It sounds like a setup, and there's some question about to what degree it was a setup. So there's a Banksy painted onto canvas, and it happens at this auction at Sotheby's, whatever, and it gets sold for, I forget exactly the amount, but let's just for argument's sake say 10 million pounds. And at the point that the hammer goes down, you watch the painting kind of slide down the canvas, and it gets shredded like a paper shredder. There's a paper shredder embedded into the frame of the artwork that literally shreds the artwork as it's sold. And he's making a point, I guess, about the selling. And so Banksy is somebody who's definitely playing around with the art world in that sense. I mean, for me, that action, that event, that action of the artist to shred the artwork as it gets sold for 20 million is quite a powerful statement. Okay, so it's an investigation for Gog's final days, but it's animated. Yes, no, I have seen it. I absolutely have seen it. Now I remember, yes. I'll try and find a video of that and share it with people. Loving Vincent, yes. Okay, great. Yes, I have seen it, and there's also an amazing film that was made where I don't know if you know what's it called, crowd sourcing is, where you get people to voluntarily of their own free will send things in. And basically it was this animated movie about Van Gogh, where people were asked just to make a drawing inspired by a moment of Van Gogh, and they basically put this into, they got something like 10,000 entries or 10,000 submissions, and they made this into this animated movie of people who are not doing this for money, they're just genuinely fascinated by Van Gogh, and these 10,000 images form the kind of animation to the movie. So that's what I'm going to talk about tomorrow, about can art be transcendent? Can it transcend these market values, these things about forgeries, questions about forgeries? Can it be something which actually moves people? Can it be something which moves people to sit down to make a drawing or a painting or whatever it is that is inspired by Van Gogh? Yes, absolutely. I'll try and put that on. There's another thing. Again, it sounds very cheesy. I'm afraid I'm quite into popular culture, and there's an episode of Doctor Who where the latest series where Doctor Who visits Van Gogh, and obviously you can't mess with time frames, but they basically, he's literally, they grab him minutes before he's about to commit suicide and take him into, the Tate Gallery or the National Gallery, wherever it is, and show him how many people are moved by his art, because this was a person who literally killed himself thinking that nobody liked his art, nobody responded to his art. It is one of the great tragedies. And yeah, I find that quite interesting.
Okay. So the homework for tomorrow?
The homework for tomorrow is the following. Thank you very much, Vanessa. The homework for tomorrow is the following. I have put on the supplementary list, if you look at the supplementary list that I've made, as well as the main list. The main list I've put down the picture of Dorian Gray, which is of course a very famous novel by Oscar Wilde. I put down the 1945 version of it, which, as a friend of mine who I spoke to earlier today said, the one where they take out all the gay references, quite correctly, right? I've also on the supplementary list included at least 6 or 7 other versions of the movie. The last major one, I think, was made in 2017 or 2016. There are many different versions. So I'd like everyone to watch at least one version of the picture of Dorian Gray, because tomorrow I did put down on the original program that we'd be discussing three movies: Picture of Dorian Gray, Woman in Gold, and Night Watching. And if you don't mind, I'm not going to discuss Woman in Gold in any great depth tomorrow. I thought what might be fun is if all of us watched a version of the Picture of Dorian Gray, all of which to some extent follow the plot, but with various lapses, omissions, or extra inclusions. And then don't worry about Night Watching. I will talk about that at the very end. But I think if we could all watch a version of the Picture of Dorian Gray, it's absolutely entertaining. It's one of the great works of literature. And we'll pick up from that tomorrow, and we'll talk about, because I think there, even though that's a very dark story in many ways, it's a gothic novel. It's a really important novel. I think it picks up a lot of this idea about what role does art play. It's about literally one single painting, which is imbued with, quite literally, with magic. So that's the homework for tomorrow. I hope that's acceptable. Once again, if you've got any questions or queries, feel free to email me. Feel free to share on our Tumblr. Please do look at the resources. I mean, somebody made a very kind comment today about just how amazing the bunch of resources that I put together are. So please do engage. And yeah, we'll talk tomorrow about the picture of Dorian Gray.
Thank you very much, Andrew, and thank you to everybody for participating. I look forward to it. I love the picture of Dorian Gray. I've got an obsession with very short novels.
Yeah. So we'll focus quite a bit on Dorian Gray tomorrow, if that's all right with everybody. And then I'll kind of end off with Night Watching, and I'll explain why I do that. So great. Thank